The day I found out that my parents had sold my childhood home, I did not scream. I did not call them names. I did not even cry. I simply sat at my kitchen table with the phone pressed against my ear, listening to a stranger tell me that the house had already been sold. For a few seconds I could not understand what she was saying. The house? Sold? Our house? The same house where I had grown up? The same house where my father had measured my height against the kitchen wall every birthday? The same house where my mother had spent almost 40 years making tea every morning? I thought there had been some mistake. So I asked her quietly, "Are you sure you have the right property?" There was a pause. Then she gave me the address. My heart sank before she even finished saying it. It was the house. The old white house at the end of Maple Street. The house with the small front porch. The house where my bedroom window looked toward the garden. The house that had belonged to my grandmother before it belonged to my parents. The house that, according to the papers my father had shown me many years earlier, was supposed to become mine. I remember putting the phone down. I remember looking at my hands. They were shaking. Not because I was afraid of losing a house. I was afraid because something much more important had just been taken from me. Trust. My parents had sold something behind my back. Something they had promised me. Something they knew mattered to me. And they had not even told me. I sat there for a long time. The room was quiet. Outside I could hear a car passing on the wet road. Rain had started falling against the window. And for the first time in my life, I wondered if I had ever really known my parents. My name is Margaret. I was 52 years old when this happened. And for most of my life I believed that family meant one simple thing. That even when people disagreed, they would never secretly take something from you that they had promised to protect. I was wrong. But what my parents did not know was that I still had one thing they had forgotten about. The original deed. And that small piece of paper would eventually change everything. The house on Maple Street. I was born in that house. Well, technically I was born in a hospital. But the house was where my life began. My mother used to say that the first time she brought me home, she carried me through the front door while my father stood behind her holding a small suitcase. The house was not large. It had 3 bedrooms, 1 bathroom, a small kitchen, a living room, and a narrow hallway that always seemed darker in winter. But to me it was enormous. As a child, every room felt like it held a secret. The attic was my favorite. My father hated when I went up there because he said I would hurt myself. But whenever he was outside working in the garden, I would climb the stairs quietly and sit among the old boxes. There were photographs there. Old clothes. Christmas decorations. My grandmother's sewing machine. And sometimes when I was lucky I would find letters. My grandmother had owned the house before my parents. She had raised my mother there. My mother often spoke about her with a mixture of love and sadness. She was a strong woman, Mom would say. She believed a home was something you protected. I never forgot those words. When my grandmother became ill, she moved in with one of my aunts for a short time. After she passed away, the house went to my mother. My father moved into it after they married. And eventually I became the only child. That part is important. There were no brothers. No sisters. Just me. My parents sometimes joked that I had no one to fight with over the television remote. But being an only child also meant something else. All their hopes seemed to rest on me. My father used to say, "One day this house will be yours." He said it so many times that I stopped counting. When I was 8, he said it while fixing the kitchen sink. When I was 14, he said it while painting my bedroom. When I was 21, he said it at the dinner table. And when I was 30, after my grandmother's last photograph had been placed in a frame, he said it again. "One day, Margaret, all of this will be yours." I believed him. Why wouldn't I? He was my father. My father, Robert, was a quiet man. He did not talk about his feelings very often. If he loved you, he showed it by fixing things. A broken chair. A leaking pipe. A loose door handle. A car that would not start. He believed that actions were more important than words. My mother, Linda, was different. She talked. She remembered birthdays. She saved old cards. She kept every school photograph. She knew exactly how I liked my tea. When I left home at 24, she cried for 3 days. My father pretended he did not cry. I knew better. I saw his eyes when he helped carry my suitcase to the car. "Call when you get there," he said. "I will. And drive carefully." "I will." He nodded. Then he closed the car door. I looked through the window. He stood there with his hands in his jacket pockets. My mother stood beside him. Neither of them waved. They just watched until my car disappeared. I thought that was what parents did. They watched their children leave, and they waited for them to come home. I married a man named Daniel when I was 29. Daniel was kind. He was not rich. He did not have a perfect job, but he made me laugh. My father liked him immediately. My mother took longer. She wanted to know if he was responsible. She wanted to know where we would live. She wanted to know if he could provide a stable life. Daniel never complained about her questions. He simply answered them. One evening after Daniel had gone home, Mom sat across from me at the kitchen table. "He seems like a good man," she said. "He is. Then you should be happy." I smiled. "I am." She reached across the table and held my hand. "You know this house will always be your home." I looked around the kitchen. The old curtains. The wooden cabinets. The little clock above the stove. I know. I did not understand then how important that sentence would become. Years passed. Life became busy. Daniel and I had 2 children. My parents got older. The house stayed the same. The paint changed. The roof was repaired. The kitchen was remodeled once. But the feeling of the house never changed. Every Christmas we went there. Every birthday we gathered there. Every difficult family moment seemed to end there. When my son graduated from high school, we celebrated in that living room. When my daughter got her first job, my mother cooked dinner. When Daniel lost his job for a few months, my father quietly handed him an envelope. Daniel tried to refuse it. Dad shook his head. "Take it. We will pay you back." I know. That was my father. He never wanted praise. He just wanted to help. And for years I believed that my parents and I were close. Maybe we were. Or maybe I simply believed we were because I had never been given a reason to think otherwise. The first time my father mentioned the deed, I was 37. We were sitting in the living room. Mom was in the kitchen. Dad had been going through a drawer filled with old documents. He pulled out a folder. "This is important," he said. "What is it?" "The house papers." I looked at him. He opened the folder. There were several documents inside. Insurance papers. Tax records. Old receipts. Then he showed me a copy of the property deed. "This is the original ownership record," he said. "I don't need to see it." "You should." I looked at the paper. My name was not there. His name was. My mother's name was there too. Dad folded the document carefully. "After we're gone, this house is yours." I remember feeling uncomfortable. "Dad, don't talk like that. Everyone gets old." "Still." He smiled. "You're our only daughter." Mom came into the room carrying tea. She heard what he said. She smiled. "He's right." I looked at both of them. "Are you sure?" Mom placed the cups on the table. "This has always been your home." Those words stayed with me. I trusted them. The trouble did not begin with an argument. It began with silence. Small changes. Tiny things that seemed meaningless at first. My mother stopped calling every Sunday. At first I thought she was tired. Then she began saying she was busy. Sometimes she would not answer the phone. Sometimes Dad would answer instead. "She's resting." "Is she okay?" "She is fine." I accepted it. People get older. People change. Life becomes difficult. I did not want to become the daughter who called every hour asking if everything was okay. So I gave them space. Then one Saturday I drove to Maple Street without telling them. I had bought some groceries. Nothing special. Just fruit, bread, tea, and a few things Mom liked. I parked outside. The house looked different. There was a small sign near the front garden. I stopped walking. It said. I stared at it. Why would my father put that sign there? I walked to the front door and knocked. Mom opened it. Her face changed when she saw me. Not with happiness. With surprise. "Margaret." "Hi, Mom. What are you doing here?" I smiled. "I brought some groceries." She looked over my shoulder. Then back at me. "You should have called." I laughed softly. Since when do I need an appointment to visit my parents? She did not laugh. That was the first moment I felt something had changed. Come inside, she said. I followed her. The house smelled the same, but it did not feel the same. There were fewer photographs on the walls. Some furniture had been moved. The old cabinet where Dad kept family papers was gone. I noticed immediately. Where's the cabinet? Mom looked toward the empty wall. We got rid of it. Why? It was old. I nodded. Then I heard Dad from the other room. Who is it? It's Margaret. He came into the hallway. He smiled. But his smile felt forced. You should have called. I looked at both of them. I was just nearby. Neither answered. We had tea. We talked about ordinary things. The weather. The neighbors. My children. But something felt wrong. Then Dad said something I did not understand. We've been thinking about making some changes. What kind of changes? He looked at Mom. She looked at him. Then he said, nothing you need to worry about. I smiled. Okay. But I did worry. That night I called Mom. She answered. Everything okay? Yes. Dad seems worried about something. He's fine. Are you sure? Yes. There was silence. Then Mom said, Margaret, sometimes you ask too many questions. I was hurt. I was only asking because I care. I know. Her voice softened. I'm sorry. We said good night. I went to bed feeling uneasy. I told myself I was imagining things. I wanted to believe that. A few weeks later Dad called me. Can you come over? Of course. When? Tomorrow. That works. His voice sounded serious. The next afternoon, I drove to Maple Street. Dad was sitting at the kitchen table. Mom was beside him. There was an envelope on the table. I sat down. What happened? Dad pushed the envelope toward me. We need to talk about the house. My heart began beating faster. What about it? He looked uncomfortable. We've decided to sell it. I stared at him. For a moment, I thought I had heard him incorrectly. Sell it? Yes. But why? We're getting older. You can move somewhere smaller. That is what we're planning. I looked at Mom. She was staring at the table. But what about what you told me? Dad looked up. What did I tell you? I felt confused. You said the house would be mine. He sighed. I said we hoped it would be yours. No. You said it was going to be mine. He leaned back. Things change. Those two words hurt more than I expected. Things change. After all those years. After all those promises. Things change. I looked at Mom. Do you agree with this? She finally looked at me. We have to think about ourselves too. I nodded slowly. I understand. Dad reached for my hand. We're not trying to hurt you. I pulled my hand back. I know. But I did not know. Not anymore. I went home that evening with tears in my eyes. Daniel was waiting for me. He knew immediately that something was wrong. What happened? I sat down. My parents want to sell the house. He was quiet. Then he asked, the Maple Street house? I nodded. What did they say? They're getting older. They want something smaller. That makes sense. I looked at him. But they promised it to me. Daniel did not answer immediately. Finally he said, did they put it in writing? I shook my head. No. He sighed. Then you should be careful. I knew he was right. But I did not want to hear it. They were my parents. I did not want to treat them like strangers. For several months nothing happened. They said they were looking for buyers. Then they said the market was difficult. Then they said they had changed their minds. I relaxed. Maybe the house would stay. Maybe everything would return to normal. Then one morning my mother called. Margaret. Yes. We're going to visit your aunt for a while. How long? A few weeks. Why? We just need a break. I felt uneasy. Is Dad okay? Yes. Is something wrong? No. Her voice became quiet. We'll talk when we come back. Then she hung up. I sat at my desk holding the phone. I should have gone to the house. I should have asked questions. I should have trusted the feeling in my stomach. But I did not. That was my mistake. I trusted my parents. And while I was trusting them, they were making plans without me. 3 months passed. I heard very little from my parents. Mom sent short messages. Dad rarely called. I visited once, but the house was empty. I assumed they were still staying with my aunt. Then one afternoon, I received a call from a woman named Sarah. I did not know her. She introduced herself as someone who worked with property records. I'm trying to reach you regarding a property on Maple Street. I thought she was calling about taxes. What about it? She paused. I believe you may have an interest in the property. My stomach tightened. What kind of interest? The house was recently transferred. Transferred? Yes. By whom? She gave me my parents' names. I felt the room become very still. Transferred to whom? She told me the buyer's name. I wrote it down. Then I asked the question that changed everything. When was it sold? She gave me the date. I stared at the calendar. It had been almost 6 weeks earlier. 6 weeks. My parents had sold the house 6 weeks ago, and I knew nothing. I called Mom. No answer. I called Dad. No answer. I called again. Nothing. I sat in my car for nearly an hour. Then I drove to Maple Street. I don't remember much about the drive. I remember traffic lights. I remember rain. I remember gripping the steering wheel. When I reached the street, I slowed down. The house was still there. But there was a truck outside. A man was carrying boxes through the front door. I parked across the street. For several minutes I could not move. Then I saw a woman in the garden. She looked toward me. I got out. Excuse me. She walked closer. Yes. Are you the new owner? She smiled. Yes. My throat tightened. I used to live here. Oh. She looked uncomfortable. My parents owned it. I see. When did you buy it? She told me. I nodded. They never told me. She looked confused. I thought you knew. I looked at the house. No. She became quiet. I am sorry. I thanked her. Then I walked back to my car. I sat inside. And finally I cried. Not loudly. Not dramatically. Just tears falling down my face while I stared at the house. My childhood was being carried away in cardboard boxes. And my parents had not even told me. That night I called Mom again. This time she answered. Margaret. Why didn't you tell me? Silence. I know about the sale. Another silence. Mom. Finally she said. Your father thought it was better this way. I closed my eyes. Better for whom? She did not answer. You promised me that house. We changed our minds. You didn't even tell me. We didn't want an argument. I laughed softly. There was no humor in it. You thought hiding it would prevent an argument? Margaret. No, Mom. My voice remained calm. I just want to understand. She sighed. Your father needed money. I froze. How much? I don't know. Where did the money go? I can't discuss that. Why not? Because it is between your father and me. I nodded, even though she could not see me. Okay. Then I asked one final question. Did Dad know you were selling it without telling me? Yes. And did you both know that you had promised it to me? She whispered. Yes. That was the moment something inside me broke. Not because I had lost the house. Because they knew. They remembered. They knew exactly what they were doing. And they still did it. I did not speak to them for several days. I needed time. Daniel wanted me to see a lawyer. I resisted. This is my family. I know. I don't want to sue my parents. You don't have to. Then what do I do? Find out what your rights are. He was right. So I began looking through old papers. I searched drawers, boxes, storage bins, every place I could think of. Then I remembered something. The attic. The old metal box. My father had once told me that some of the original family documents were kept there. I drove to the house. Of course, it was no longer mine. The new owner lived there. I stood outside for a long time. Then I called her. I explained who I was. She listened. I still have some mail that came for your parents, she said. I don't want the mail. There is something else. What? When we moved in, we found an old metal box in the attic. My heart stopped. What kind of box? Very old. Brown metal. That belongs to my family. She paused. I haven't opened it. I felt tears in my eyes. Would you let me collect it? Yes. The next morning she left it on the porch. I carried it to my car. My hands were shaking. I placed it on the passenger seat. Then I drove home. The box was rusty. The lock was broken. Inside were old photographs, birth certificates, insurance papers, letters, and beneath them all was a thick folded document. I knew what it was before I opened it. The original deed. I sat on the floor. I unfolded it carefully. There were names, dates, property details, and something I had never seen before. A handwritten note attached to the back. It was in my grandmother's handwriting. My hands trembled. I read it twice, then a third time. It said that the house was to remain within the family. That after my mother's lifetime, ownership was intended for me. But there was something else. A legal transfer document had been signed years earlier. My grandmother had transferred the property interest to my mother, but with a condition attached. My mother could live there. She could maintain it. But certain rights belonged to the next generation. I did not understand all of it. So I took everything to a lawyer. And that was when the story changed. The lawyer's office was quiet. His name was Thomas. He read every page carefully. I sat across from him. Daniel sat beside me. Neither of us spoke. Finally, Thomas looked up. Where did you get this? It was in my grandmother's old box. He looked at the deed again. This is the original. I thought the property had already been sold. It may have been. Then what does this mean? He pointed to a section. This condition is important. I leaned forward. What does it say? He explained it slowly. My mother had not possessed the kind of complete ownership my parents had always assumed. There were rights attached to the property, rights that could affect a sale. I stared at him. So they could not legally sell it? I didn't say that. My heart sank. He continued. The sale may still be valid, but we need to examine how the transfer was done. I nodded. What do you need? Every document you have. I gave him everything. The deed, the handwritten note, old letters, copies my father had given me years earlier. He spent days reviewing them. Then he called. Margaret, I found something. I went to his office. He placed a document on the table. This is the sale agreement. I looked at it. My parents' signatures were there. Then I saw something else. A statement claiming that there were no competing family claims. I looked at Thomas. But there was a family claim. Yes. Then why did they sign this? He did not answer. I knew. They had hoped no one would check. They had hoped I would remain silent. They had hoped that because I was their daughter, I would simply accept what they did. I called my parents. Dad answered. Margaret. I found the deed. Silence. What deed? The original. He stopped speaking. I could hear Mom in the background. Then Dad said, You don't understand. Then explain it to me. We needed the money. You could have told me. We thought you would fight us. I might have. His voice became tired. We had no choice. I closed my eyes. There is always a choice. He did not answer. I asked him something I had never asked before. Did you sell the house because you needed money? Or because you wanted to keep the inheritance from me? He was silent. That silence told me everything. Then Mom came on the phone. Margaret, please. No, Mom. I was crying now. But my voice remained quiet. I need the truth. She whispered. Your father made mistakes. Did he lose money? Another silence. Then she said, Yes. How much? She told me. It was a large amount. Dad had made several bad financial decisions. They had debts, loans, bills. They were afraid of losing everything. So they sold the house. But there was more. The buyer had offered them much less than the property's true value because my parents had been desperate. They had signed quickly. They had hidden the sale. They believed they could move somewhere smaller and start again. I listened. For the first time I understood their fear. But understanding did not erase what they had done. I went to see them. They were staying in a small rented apartment. It was nothing like Maple Street. No garden. No porch. No old family photographs. Just 2 small rooms and a kitchen. Mom looked older. Dad looked smaller. I sat across from them. For a long time none of us spoke. Then Dad said, "I'm sorry." I looked at him. "I believe you." He looked surprised. "But I am still hurt." He nodded. "I know." Mom began crying. "We thought you would hate us." "I don't hate you." She looked at me. "Then why won't you forgive us?" I took a breath. "Because forgiveness and trust are not the same thing." She lowered her eyes. "I need time." Dad nodded. "I understand." The legal process took months. There were meetings, documents, calls, questions. The buyer had not known about the family claim. That mattered. He had purchased the property believing the sale was clean. Thomas explained that we needed to find a solution that did not destroy another innocent person's life. That was important to me. I did not want revenge. I did not want the new owner punished for something he did not know. I wanted the truth recognized. Eventually, a settlement was discussed. The buyer would keep the house. My parents would be responsible for part of the financial loss. And I would receive compensation based on the rights attached to the original deed. It was not what I had imagined. I had imagined getting the house back. But by then I understood something. The house was not the real inheritance. The real inheritance was the truth. The truth about what my grandmother had wanted. The truth about what my parents had done. And the truth about what our family had become. A year after the sale I drove past Maple Street. I almost did not recognize the house. The garden had been changed. The old porch had been painted. There were new flowers. A child's bicycle stood near the door. I parked across the road. I stayed in the car. Daniel was beside me. "You want to go in?" he asked. I shook my head. "No." "Are you sure?" "Yes." I looked at the house. I realized that I did not need to own it anymore. I only needed to remember it. The kitchen where my mother taught me to bake. The hallway where my father measured my height. The bedroom where I cried after my first heartbreak. The living room where my grandmother once sat beside me and told me that family was something you cared for. The house had been sold. But those memories could not be sold. They belonged to me. My parents eventually moved into a small apartment closer to me. I helped them with some things. I drove Dad to appointments. I brought Mom groceries. I repaired small things around their apartment. At first I did it because they were my parents. Later I did it because I wanted to. There was a difference. We rebuilt our relationship slowly. Not perfectly. Slowly. There were still difficult conversations. There were days when Mom cried. There were days when Dad became quiet. And there were days when I simply could not talk about the past. But we learned something important. Love does not erase consequences. And forgiveness does not mean pretending something never happened. One evening Dad came to my house. He carried a small box. "I want you to have this." I opened it. Inside were photographs from Maple Street. My first birthday. My first day of school. My grandmother sitting in the garden. My parents on their wedding day. And one photograph of me as a little girl standing beside my father. I looked at it. "You kept this?" He smiled. "Of course." I touched the photograph. "Dad." "Yes." "Why did you sell the house?" He looked down. I was ashamed. "Of what?" "Failing." I stayed quiet. He continued. "I spent my whole life believing I was supposed to protect my family." His eyes filled with tears. "And when I couldn't, I hid it." I understood then. My father had not sold the house because he stopped loving me. He sold it because he was afraid. But fear had made him dishonest. And dishonesty had hurt everyone. I reached across the table. He took my hand. "I should have trusted you," he said. I nodded. "Yes." That was all I could say. Sometimes the most painful conversations do not need many words. Months later, Mom asked me if I still had the original deed. I smiled. "Yes." "Why do you keep it?" I thought about that. "Because it reminds me." "Of the house." "No." "Then what?" I looked at her. "Of how easily people can lose something valuable when they stop telling the truth." She became quiet. Then she said, "Your grandmother would have understood that." I smiled. "I think she would." The original deed is now in a safe place. I do not look at it often, but sometimes I take it out. I unfold the old paper. I look at the faded ink. I think about my grandmother. I think about my parents. I think about the house. And I think about the little girl I once was. She believed that her parents could never hurt her. I wish I could go back and tell her something. I would tell her that people can love you and still make terrible choices. I would tell her that family can disappoint you without becoming your enemy. I would tell her that forgiveness takes time. And most importantly, I would tell her that losing a place does not mean losing your home. Because home is not always four walls. Sometimes home is a memory. Sometimes it is a person. Sometimes it is the feeling you carry inside yourself. Years have passed now. The house on Maple Street still stands. I sometimes wonder who lives there. Maybe they have children. Maybe they sit on the porch on summer evenings. Maybe they have no idea what happened there before they arrived. And that is okay. Their life is theirs. My memories are mine. I no longer drive past the house with sadness. When I see it now, I simply smile. Because I finally understand something I did not understand when I was younger. A house can be inherited. Money can be inherited. Land can be inherited. But the most important things cannot be written on a deed. Trust cannot. Love cannot. Memories cannot. And family cannot be forced to remain family, just because the law says two people share the same blood. My parents made a choice that hurt me deeply. They sold my inheritance behind my back. They believed I had nothing that could stop them. But they had forgotten one thing. The original deed was still in my hands. That document gave me proof. But more importantly, it gave me the courage to stop doubting myself. For months, I wondered if I was being selfish. I wondered if I should simply let everything go. I wondered if protecting myself meant I was no longer a good daughter. But I learned that standing up for yourself does not mean you stop loving people. It means you understand that your heart deserves protection too. There is one final thing I want to say. If you have ever been betrayed by someone you love, you may understand what I mean when I say the betrayal itself is not always the hardest part. Sometimes the hardest part is questioning every memory that came before it. You wonder which moments were real. You wonder whether the love was real. You wonder if you missed signs. I spent years asking myself those questions. Eventually I stopped. Because the good memories were still good. My father teaching me to ride a bicycle was real. My mother sitting beside my bed when I was sick was real. My grandmother holding my hand in that old house was real. The betrayal was real too. Both things could exist at the same time. That was the lesson I needed to learn. People are complicated. Families are complicated. Sometimes love and disappointment live in the same room. Sometimes forgiveness comes without trust. Sometimes closure does not come from getting back what you lost. Sometimes closure comes from finally understanding why you had to let it go. I never got the house back. But I got something else. I got the truth. I got my voice back. And slowly I got my peace back. The original deed is still with me. But I no longer keep it because I am afraid someone will take something from me. I keep it because it reminds me of who I became after everything happened. A woman who learned that her worth was never measured by a house. A daughter who learned that forgiveness does not require forgetting. And a person who finally understood that sometimes the strongest thing you can do is walk away from the past without carrying hatred into the future. That is what I chose. I chose peace. Not because what happened did not matter, but because it mattered enough for me to learn from it. And whenever I think about that old house on Maple Street, I no longer think about what my parents sold. I think about everything that house gave me. A childhood, a family, memories, lessons, and one final reminder. Never let someone else's betrayal convince you that you are no longer worthy of love. Sometimes people make choices that hurt us. Sometimes they disappoint us. Sometimes they take things we thought would always be ours. But they cannot take the person we become afterward. That part belongs to us. And sometimes after everything is gone, that is the inheritance that matters most.